The Terre Haute native and America's Got Talent Golden Buzzer winner has captured the hearts of not only the judges and America, but now Walker Hayes.
How would you feel if one day you were just a regular cleaner, and the next you were a star on America's Got Talent, with everyone watching your every move? Richard Goodall had the exact same thing happen to him. However, even though fame seemed like a dream, it came with its own set of problems. Here's a look at Richard's life after the fame, how he stays grounded, gives back, and deals with the stress of becoming famous all of a sudden. Let's jump right in. The weight of fame. Richard Goodall's life turned upside down when he won America's Got Talent. At one point, he was the quiet Terre Haute cleaner who blended in with the scene. The next thing you know, he's the center of attention. Picture a world where everyone is watching you, and every move you make could be caught on camera. Being a star overnight meant new things for Richard when he had to deal with the attention. Before he got to the AGT stage, Richard's life was pretty normal. People didn't notice him as he went through shops, got a coffee, and went about his day. But now, he no longer had the peace and quiet he used to have. Eyes followed him everywhere he went. Fans, paparazzi, and even random people who just happened to be nearby were all eager to take a picture of him, share it, and talk about him. It felt like stepping onto a stage that never shut down for someone who had spent most of his life slipping into the background. It's hard to believe, but fame doesn't give people the peace they think it does. Being private is no longer an option when you're famous. Going to the store for food can quickly turn into a picture shoot. For Richard, this meant giving up the easy but very important ability to walk around without being seen. He was now Richard Goodall, the singer who won America's Got Talent. He was no longer just Richard from Terre Haute. Now that everyone knew his name, he had to deal with getting attention all the time. It wasn't just about being seen in public that made him feel like he had lost control of his life. It got harder for him to do simple things like spend time with his family or relax by himself. There was a steady reminder of his new life every time he went outside. It wasn't just about fame anymore. It was about the stress of having everyone watch, analyze, and break down every move you make. Also, it's hard on the mind. Fame changes more than just how other people see you. It also changes how you see yourself. Richard was no longer just trying to live his life. He was living it under a microscope. This might make you crazy. Being on all the time, living up to people's standards, and dealing with the constant flow of attention can wear anyone down. There are nights when you can't sleep, worry, and the overwhelming feeling that you're caught in a whirlwind you didn't ask for. Richard had to figure out how to handle things, even though there was a lot of chaos going on around him. A lot of popular people have to deal with the weight of fame while still trying to stay true to who they were before it all began. For Richard, fame made him feel more open and vulnerable than ever before, like everyone was trying to make him look perfect. What do you do when the truth about fame hits you, and you start to question whether it was all worth it? The next part of Richard's journey holds the answer. How does he deal with the stress of being famous while still being himself? It's not just about the lights. What does fame really mean when you know what's left behind when it goes out? Next, let's look more closely at how Richard dealt with his fame and what that shows about his true nature. When everyone starts to watch your every move, will you be able to stay grounded? Richard's story shows that being famous takes more than ability. Staying humble in Terre Haute. There are lots of offers to move to Los Angeles, the city of dreams, and the world is at your feet. Sure, most people would jump at the chance. But what about Richard Goodall? He did the wrong thing. He did not go after the bright lights of Hollywood. Instead, he stayed in Terre Haute. his small-town home. Not because he didn't want to go after bigger goals, but because he already knew what was important. There was nothing about big towns or the promise of a new life that interested Richard. He wasn't successful because of his fame or money. It was because of the ideals he lived by every day. He had grown as a person in Terre Haute, and staying there wasn't just to avoid fame, it was to stay true to himself. Richard didn't just choose to stay in his small town. It showed what he valued most: family, society, and being himself. It looked like a good idea to leave and go to Los Angeles. But Richard knew more about something that many people don't: the difference between being successful and being happy. He wasn't looking for the perfect way of life. He was looking for purpose. He knew that being truly successful isn't about big cities or fame, but about having a purpose, having people who back you, and loving the work you do every day. And that's where his choice to keep working as a janitor at Chauncey Rose Middle School comes into play. Richard saw it as more than just a job. It reminded him of where he came from, who he was before the cameras, and what kept him grounded. He knew that being on AGT meant he could quit that job at any time, but he didn't. The thing that kept Richard's life in balance was that he kept his hands in the dirt by working at the school. He might have made a choice that some people would find strange. If you could have something else, why do the same work over and over? However, for Richard, it wasn't about the work itself. It was about keeping a sense of purpose. People wanted to live a life that was bigger than the noise of fame and the cheers of the crowd. Rather than having to, he kept working because he strongly believed that the most important things in life are the small, regular things we do every day. For Richard, though, it's not just about being humble. It's also about being loyal. Terre Haute didn't just enjoy his win when he won AGT. They came together to support him. The whole community had been behind him before the cameras came out, and they were still there to cheer him on, whether he was on stage or sweeping the floors at school. For them, Richard was more than just a singer. He was a person who showed that goals can come true no matter where you start. He was their hero, and one of them at the same time. People are always looking for the next big thing, and moving to a bigger place is seen as the only way to get ahead. Richard's decision to stay in Terre Haute means a lot. He didn't want the attention of fame to change who he was. It wasn't necessary for him to move to a bigger city to prove anything. He had already shown that staying true to your ideals is enough to make you great, without changing everything about your life. Staying in Terre Haute wasn't just a way to stay out of the spotlight. He was embracing what was most important to him: his neighborhood, his family, and the work he did every day. He didn't need to seek fame or money to find meaning in his life. He had already found it by caring about other people besides himself. In the next part of his story, we'll find out how Richard deals with the stress of being famous without losing sight of what's important. Is it possible to stay true to yourself when you're in the spotlight? Let's take a look and see. The challenges of being the singing janitor. Most people can only dream of seeing their dreams come true by winning America's Got Talent. Richard Goodall's dream came with a catch, though. How do you mix fame, concerts, and touring with the quiet life you've always known? Not saying no to the attention is not the only answer. Richard always had to balance two different worlds: the busy, high-stress life of a performer and the steady, normal life of a caretaker in his city. One night, you play in front of thousands of people, putting your whole heart into every note. The next day, you go back to your quiet routine of cleaning school hallways. Richard's life was full of traveling, practicing, and performing live, but he didn't let it take him away from where he came from. His duties in the small town didn't go away. As the principal of Chauncey Rose Middle School, he still had to deal with the same kids and staff who had been there from the beginning. How does someone keep everything together? Setting limits and managing his time are very important. He should also remember what's most important: his family, his neighborhood, and the simple things that kept him grounded before he became famous. But Richard's family is also affected by his fame, not just his work-life balance. Richard's wife and family have had to get used to their new life, which includes cameras, the constant stress of public life, and losing their privacy all of a sudden. What used to be private can now be seen by everyone. Richard's wife is very important to him because she helps him stay true to himself. She helps him stay in touch with the things in life that aren't about being famous or acting on stage. They both have to get used to living in the public eye while trying to protect what's most important to them: their relationship and their family life. Richard's family is what keeps him grounded, even when things are crazy. The quiet times he spends at home, away from the cameras, help him remember who he is when he's not on stage. But even though they are at home, they are always torn between being regular and being famous. Richard knows he can't just walk into a store without being seen, but he still tries to act normally. How does someone like Richard get used to being more than just a cleaner? He manages to find balance, but it's always hard for him. Every day, life and being a famous performer always make people feel tense. With all the demands and standards, the world of celebrities can be hard to handle at times. Richard is pulled between two realities, one in which he's a neighborhood hero and one in which he's a national star. There's always the question of how much of his normal life he can keep while taking advantage of the new chances that fame gives him. Richard walks that fine line with style. As many great chances as fame gave her, it also brought a lot of changes, some of which were hard to handle. Being in the public eye all the time, performing all the time, and the mental stress of it all can wear you down. Richard never forgot who he was or where he came from, though. The balancing act isn't easy, but it's something Richard continues to manage daily. Richard's commitment to giving back. Even though Richard Goodall won America's Got Talent, he didn't just want to enjoy his success, but he didn't want his newfound fame to be all about him. Instead, he used it to help other people. The Believe in Fund wasn't an aside, it was an important part of his life after AGT. Richard's reason for making the fund was clear. He wanted other artists to be able to follow their dreams, just like he had. For the fund, it's not just a charity. It's a movement that helps young people who want to make it big, even if money is an issue. Even though it's hard to balance a public job with this cause, Richard finds the time to do it. He works hard every day to make sure that the Believe in Fund can continue to help kids who want to be musicians but don't have the money to do so. This project is very important because it shows the same values that helped Richard get where he is now: hard work, persistence, and the belief that anyone can achieve if they are given the chance. This desire to help others is a big part of Richard's life, and it affects how he spends his time, whether he's traveling to perform or trying to grow the fund. Richard wants to give back and supports arts education at the same time. Richard's music was his space and his love, and he knows that it can do a lot of good in the lives of young people. Richard talks to kids in schools all over the country about his life and encourages them that no dream is too big. He does this to support arts education. He doesn't just give talks when he visits. He also wants to connect with kids who might not believe in their own abilities. By telling them his story, Richard shows them that keeping true to your craft, working hard, and never giving up are the keys to success, not fame or money. Richard feels compelled to do it, even though he has a lot going on in his life. He makes time for events, whether they are small, like a short visit to a nearby school, or big, like a concert, because he knows how much it means to the kids he meets. But Richard's work for causes is more than just the talks and the funds. He wants to stay close to his roots. This person has had so much success that it would be easy to forget where it all started. But Richard never forgets where he came from. Giving back to the community that helped him when no one else knew his name is what keeps him grounded there. His dedication to arts education and the Believe in Fund shows how deeply he cares about his roots. It also serves as a reminder that success isn't just about getting to the top. It's also about helping others get there. Richard shows that his success wasn't just for himself by helping aspiring singers and promoting arts education. It's part of something much bigger than himself. It comes from being kind, working hard, and believing in other people. So, how does Richard keep up with all of this and his busy job? In spite of the demands of fame, how does he keep giving back to his community, the young artists, and his roots? Richard's influence will only grow as his trip goes on. Staying true while chasing dreams. Richard Goodall had a lot of opportunities after winning America's Got Talent. Hollywood, record companies, and song producers all showed up. Their eyes lit up at his skill, and they wished he would become famous. The big question for Richard, though, wasn't whether he could make it or not. It was how he could stay true to himself in the entertainment business. Fame and money were appealing, but so were the sacrifices that usually come with them. The record companies wanted him to be a certain way, but Richard was set on staying true to himself no matter what. Richard's time working with record labels made me think of the business side of music, where it's not always about the art, but about making sales. They gave him deals, told him they would help him succeed, and wanted him to be something bigger and better. But Richard knew that being successful meant more than just albums and concerts. He also knew that it meant keeping true to the music he loved. He didn't give in to the push from the business world to do what they thought would sell. But he stuck to his guns. He made decisions that were in line with who he was as an artist, which kept his sound unique and personal. That's what made him unique. He didn't let the business mold him. He instead used his stage to be himself and share the music that was important to him this way. Richard was having a hard time not only getting a record deal, but also making choices that would affect the rest of his career. He had to make decisions that many artists dream of: making money, becoming famous, and getting to play on bigger stages. Richard didn't just want to be well known, though. He wanted to keep hearing the music that made him feel alive. Here's where the real challenge came in. How do you balance the need to make money with keeping true to your art? Richard was offered the chance to go big and reach millions of people, but he knew that being real was more important. He didn't want to change his style to fit in with mainstream tastes, and that still shows in the songs he makes today. It wasn't easy to pick the right road, and it cost me emotionally. There were times when Richard wondered if the fame was worth it, if it meant changing who he was. Big contracts, world tours, and the attention that came with success were hard to turn down. But he was also afraid of losing what made him special. It wasn't just about whether or not he'd sell more songs that these choices made him feel bad. It was also about how to stay true to his music while dealing with all the things that fame brought. Richard's journey was harder than it seemed at first because of this inner conflict. He had to navigate the tension between pursuing fame and keeping grounded in the values that had brought him here. So, how did Richard deal with this constant struggle between fame and being himself? It wasn't easy, but he had to do it every day. Despite the mental and emotional challenges, Richard has been able to stay true to his values. This is what has made his work unique. He didn't just want to be famous. He decided to make music that was important to him and showed who he was. By doing this, he built a career that wasn't just about being famous, it was about being himself. As Richard's story goes on, it becomes clear how hard it is to be true to yourself in a world that is always pushing you to be something else. However, what takes place when you become even more famous and the stakes rise? How does he keep his personal life and the expectations of fame in balance? Let's see what Richard has in store next, and see how he continues to deal with the stress of being a star and someone who enjoys the little things in life. The realities of touring and staying grounded. There's more to life on the road than just the thrill of playing in front of a crowd. There's a good chance that Richard Goodall had no idea how tired he would be after becoming famous and successful on America's Got Talent. It's not all fun and games when you're touring. It's non-stop, physically draining work that can make you wonder if it's all worth it. Traveling all the time, staying up late, and having shows right after each other can wear anyone down. It was more than just a job for Richard, though. It was a fact of life that he had to deal with. Life on the road can be hard for those who work behind the scenes. There are long bus rides, flights that take you through different time zones, and endless practices. It can be hard to keep up your energy when all you want to do is rest. Richard had to figure out how to deal with being so tired and still give each night his best show. Even though the lights and cheers are exciting, it's hard for him to ignore how his body and mind are feeling. Richard learned to give up things and change his habits to stay healthy enough to perform, but the task never got easier. How can someone stay awake when they haven't had time to breathe? To deal with things, Richard had to find ways to rest while still keeping up with his busy schedule, eat well, and find small moments of peace in a world that was full of chaos. Going on tour doesn't just hurt Richard's health, it also changes his home life. He gets farther away from his wife, his neighborhood, and the simple life he used to know while he's on the road. Richard misses the simple, calm days when he could just chill out at home and not have to be on all the time for cameras and fans. It's hard for him to be away from his family and friends, so he needs to find a way to stay in touch, even though they are far away. He misses more than just his family. He misses the life that kept him going and calm. His quiet time at home in the small town is what keeps him grounded. As he tours the country, he has to keep reminding himself of why he started this all in the first place. But the hardest thing about life on the road is always having to balance. As Richard's fame grows, he needs to find ways to keep living the way he used to, with a strong focus on family, community, and a love for the simple things in life. Fame doesn't make it that simple. He may feel like he is being pulled in every way by the need to be everywhere, perform all the time, and meet the expectations of fans and people in the industry. Richard, on the other hand, keeps his mind on the most important things. Family, morals, and the desire to stay true to himself keep him grounded as he deals with the fame that could easily take over his life. Becoming successful isn't easy, and Richard is always having to work hard to keep his feet on the ground as his job takes him up. There are, however, times when Richard learns more about himself, how to deal with the sacrifices, and what it takes to stay true to his roots. The question still stands: how does Richard keep up with the demands of fame and family while still living the simple life he used to love? Sometimes the answer isn't clear, but Richard's journey shows us that it changes all the time, and the next step is never a sure thing. As Richard's tour goes on, one question keeps coming to mind: how long can someone stay true to their roots when everything around them is changing all the time? How Richard stays balanced as his fame grows and the stakes get higher, will be shown in the next part of his story. Let's see how he handles this problem. The price of success. Sudden success is often seen as a dream come true, but for Richard Goodall, it's been more of a double-edged sword. The excitement of winning America's Got Talent and performing for massive crowds quickly gave way to the emotional toll of living in the public eye. Fame doesn't come without its challenges, and Richard had to face the isolation and stress that often follow. The attention was constant, and while he was thankful for his success, the weight of being in the spotlight took a toll on his mental health. People who were in the public eye didn't just get to walk on red carpets and get applause. They were constantly watched and never knew if people liked them for who they were or just what they saw on stage. Going through these mental ups and downs has not been easy for Richard. It hurt a lot to be alone, especially when he saw how different his life had become. Fame can make you feel strangely alone, and for someone like Richard, who was used to a quieter, more private life, this was hard to get used to. Richard was never ready for the stress of always being in the public eye, the pressure to always be on for fans, or the emotional complexity of being a figure for so many people. Taking care of his mental health was making it hard for him to enjoy acting and make his dreams come true. As Richard got used to his new life, he knew he had to take care of his mental health. He had to deal with more stress because of his fame, but it also gave him the chance to take charge of his mental health. Therapy became an important part of his daily life because it helped him deal with the stress, anxiety, and mental fatigue that came from being on show all the time. Richard also found comfort in thinking about himself and taking time to be alone, away from everyone else. He made sure to check in with himself, whether it was during quiet times at home or while traveling. Being aware of himself became his anchor, keeping him steady as things changed all around him. Richard has also grown a lot as a person because of his fame. Richard used to be a caretaker with a dream, but his success on AGT has changed the way he thinks about life and success. He no longer measures his success by the attention or the red carpets. Now, he looks at it in terms of the difference he can make in people's lives. Not only did winning AGT change his job, it also changed the way he saw the world. He stopped just performing and started getting to know people better. He stopped just achieving his dreams and started using his stage to inspire other people. He is now more honest, caring, and focused on what really counts because of this change in his point of view. He realizes that true success isn't about fame, it's about connection. Every show, every song, every moment is now a way for him to lift others up, not just himself. This shift has made his journey not just about personal achievement, but about leaving a lasting, positive impact on everyone he meets. If you enjoyed Richard's journey, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And make sure to click on the next video popping up on your screen to keep following his incredible story. You don't want to miss this.